Going live.
Okay,
You're live. There you go.
the time
afternoon.
is 8:30.
3, 4. Just turned 4.
And calling the monthly meeting of the Troy Community Land Bank to order. First item up is our roll call. We have Monica Krzyzewski here, Ryan Barker,
Here.
Brian Sana,
Here.
Andrew Cooper,
Here.
and Seamus Starley.
Here.
Absent is Jamie Maker. And our support staff is, which got sent out yesterday, maybe.
I did.
Any corrections other than what was asked to correct? I apologize for spelling your name wrong.
All good. I didn't even notice. I was so worried about the content.
I thought I had it right. Must have missed one. Anyway, do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to our financial report.
It's me. So I gave you guys the P&L statement as of August 31. As of August 31, and we have one operating bank account, so I gave you the bank statement just so you have all the transactions, and then the reconciliation report so that you guys can see how it reconciles to the profit and loss or balance sheet if we have capital expenditures. I guess not much to report in terms of activity that we had to discuss at least ahead of time immediately. You know, we are waiting on, going forward, we're waiting on another $65,000 to fulfill our $200,000, but we'll talk more about that in the LBI discussion immediately after the financial discussion. But I guess there's one item I should address now, which is the insurance expense. When the insurance in the last couple of years was booked, there's a recurring charge there that I'm not ready to take off. So it continues to go up. The recurring charge was put in, I believe, by Al Michaels, and it was just a perpetual recurring insurance charge. So it will show on your balance sheet that prepaid insurance. I'm going to give you that line in a second here. Yeah. Okay. Yep, it's the second page.
1301. 1300.
13001. It shows prepaid insurance negative 51,000, and then it shows your insurance expense inflated. It's because his recurring charge, once the third party audit's done, they're gonna make an adjusting journal entry to the insurance, and then once the adjusting journal entry is done, then at that point we'll know what our balance should be, our expenditure that we paid in insurance. So essentially assume that negative 51,000 is going to offset not quite the 80, because they might offset some expenses from last year, but that recurring charge, which is something you can do in QuickBooks, you can automatically have a recurring transaction every month. We could turn it off now, which is fine. And I talked to the bookkeepers about doing that, but it's at least something to mention that that's going to change, you know, the 69600 on your profit and loss. And as Brian brought up, the 13001 prepaid expense. Other than that, everything seems pretty good on our balance sheet. I want to turn off.
Right, pardon me.
Yep.
So when you're saying recurring charge, just our insurance monthly charge, or
It's
what's the
booked
recurring
that way, but it's not actually happening.
charge? Okay.
So it's not money.
I get it,
Yes.
yeah.
So Tenite Group is our insurance provider. We also have Travelers, Lancaster, Dryden Mutual, and then we have Lee and Mason. Lee and Mason's the only one we pay every month. The rest of them we pay once or twice a year. And so because it's paid twice a year, you shouldn't, absorb that charge all in the month that you pay it. It needs to be, capitalized over the whole year. It's an asset, because if we canceled the insurance, we could cash out for what we hadn't used so far.
Mhm.
But the problem with Al's journal entry is it didn't take into consideration sort of a, passing of the baton between leadership. And so when the organization went sort of in hibernation mode for 8 months, 9 months, the books were still doing the charge, even though it wasn't necessarily supposed to be capitalized, or should have been capitalized. So that's gonna get cleaned up, but I just wanted to mention it so that our insurance yearly shouldn't be $88,000. But because that recurring charge is happening, it's pulling out of an account, the prepaid expense insurance that's negative. So obviously we don't have any money in prepaid.
Mhm.
So
And when's insurance renew?
April or May.
And do you have an
That's-
agent that's looking at, I mean, there's some significant increases this year coming up, so I know just in general,
Mhm.
right? Do they shop the market for you?
I assume Tenite Group is shopping the market. Haven't got there yet. We paid
There's
the,
very few insurance companies that'll even do this kind of work,
Right,
and these are the ones that the other land banks use as well.
yeah, I knew that was a challenge in the early days, so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something I'd like to look into, with when things are not so pressing, like from the LBI grant perspective right
Right.
now and a couple other things.
Yep.
As it comes closer to renewal, I think we'll have bandwidth to shop that around.
And the challenges of that the general commercial, we gotta have that
Mhm.
just for what we do.
Yeah.
Which is
And of
always
course-
gonna be the big nut.
Sure. And of course, yeah, I think it's minimum premiums like 24,000 for that particular one. But there are some insurance expenses. The Lee and Mason is based on our properties themselves, and I think Dryden might be specifically for 791 River Street. So as we offload some of those properties, the insurance expense will go down, but there is a fixed portion, like you're saying.
Yep.
And then the other thing I wanted to mention was we want to clean the balance sheet up in terms of the properties we have. So if you look at the line items, 14,012, 14,013, there's about 30 of these properties that we don't own anymore, and so it doesn't need to reflect as zero. I tried to delete them. Well, you don't delete them, you make them inactive so you can reactivate them if you need them. But I tried to activate them or deactivate them. And when I did it, it said there was a potential 1099 tied to it. And so I just shot an email out to the bookkeepers. I said, do you know the quick way to or take the 1099s off? And if he does, then he'll be able to. I gave them the list of the accounts that we don't actually own anymore. And of course, we have 3 or 4 bank accounts listed on here that have zero balances and perpetually have had those balances. That's at like 10,000, the account number 10,000, 10,020, 10,021, 10,050. It's on our list today of things to go over, potentially closing those accounts in new business because they, aren't used and haven't been used for years. It would clean up our balance sheet from 4 pages to maybe 2 or 3 if we can get rid of some of those zero numbers.
Okay, any questions, comments?
How close are we to getting the audit?
It's the audit's fun. That I think we're going into regulatory compliance in BB, 5B there.
Okay.
So we'll talk about
can
it,
hold on.
or the 5A is bond a deal with third party. So let's just skip to the LBI funds and then we'll definitely talk about that. So because of our special meeting, I'm going to be looking at this page here. Because of our special meeting, we were able to approve some expenses and we spent all $200,000 of our and that money that's the final 65,000 that they should positing any day. And we have to reapply for this LBI grant by September 20th. So that's my mission today. I've done all the legwork. In fact, this worksheet is all the legwork to doing it. The reports at the bottom, LBI 1 said we were going to do. And the way I see the organization sitting on the right is what we actually achieved, which is, obviously not close to what we had proposed, based on things like vacant lots improved, properties rehabbed. And I think when they say vacant lots improved, they mean putting a building on them. I don't think they mean just cutting all the brush. Yeah. So, so I really think that, we're gonna go into it probably humbly and honestly that we're rebuilding and reorganizing. But unfortunately, the scorecard doesn't look great. I just think it's,
Is there a definition for that, or is it, just because I think we all kind of were sitting there saying, yeah, vacant lots improved would mean, but is there a definition somewhere that states if you're going to say this, it means that?
yeah, probably.
I think going in honest
Mhm.
and where the organization has come from
Mhm.
out of hibernation to now, I think, and what it's achieved and what it's tackling and development tool for the city. And I think that will go a long way.
I agree, but I don't want to be premature, in touting what we've done until, between you and I and the lamppost, until there's construction going on buildings and
Sure.
things are happening and, there's excitement that people can actually
No,
see.
but I think it's the conversation of what is that next step?
Yeah, sure.
Right.
Sure.
Like, this is what we've done, and this is what we've done with the funding that we have, and you know what I mean. And this is that next step.
Transparency.
Right. I think transparency is going to be key. I think humbling component of that.
I think the person who administrates this is Crystal Loeffler, and I think that she's aware of where we are because she's the one that reminded us that we had this grant available in May or maybe even June. So the fact that we used up all the money in 3 months from past expenditures, she probably recognizes that.
She's a good champion for
Yeah.
communities.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we came year after year with like a zero scorecard, then she probably assumed that the land bank wasn't doing anything at all.
Is this list of metrics LBI's list?
Yeah, when we applied for the grant, that's what we applied to say we were going to do on the left.
Right, but did we make the list or are we giving a list? Are we given the list?
I believe we're
Like all
given
the
the
land
list,
banks are given
yes.
the same list? Okay.
That's why I was asking the
Okay.
definition.
Oh, okay, yeah.
If we came up with the wording on the page, then
Right.
no, but if this was language lifted from,
Yeah.
it's consistent across land banks, I would want to know what their definition of improved is, because there is a value in taking a property that is completely, overgrown and, at least maintaining it on your way to redevelopment. I
Yeah,
would think.
and I agree. And there are a few obvious things that we're about to achieve in the next coming months. Namely 791 River Street. I know probably people don't want to talk about it, but we should be finishing that at some point and selling it. And of course, 7 and 9 Park and 140 President Street will all be things that will be moved to owners that can store it over it for a long period of time. So we're going to create some velocity, but unfortunately, we're going to go into a report basically saying we didn't accomplish much this year from their metrics. So
What's the risk there?
I don't think much. It seems like they're very supportive of land banks, but I mean, there's no other alternative. You can't pretend a building was constructed if it wasn't, or you can't pretend it was sold to an owner if it wasn't. So we have to go into, looking like that. But I wanted you all to know where we were before I applied and find out. I'm sure they're going to approve. Just one of those things where you go and looking at it, and I said, wish there was a couple things on here.
What was your takeaway from that meeting you went to? Are there other land banks in the same situation?
In Oswego?
Yeah.
Yes. At the Land Bank Symposium, that they're very supportive. The money's very flexible. They want us to succeed. There's money that people have been using in LBI 2, and that they assume that this is going to be the funding mechanism going forward for land banks.
I mean, are there talking to other directors of land banks? Are there other banks in the same situation as us that might have had a bad stretch? Like everybody can't be out there said, well.
Right. I think there are some that are just starting. And I think a lot of people thought that Troy Land Bank was going to fold, including the auditors when I first talked to them, and including, HCR Crystal Loeffler. She sort of seemed like, oh, you guys haven't communicated in a long time. So I thought I think a lot of people have expected our land bank to not be viable past a certain point. And so I think a lot of people are rooting for us. I don't think established land banks are at a point where they're sort of in hibernation mode. But I sat next to a guy from Franklin County, and he was just starting. They got their first property. They were getting an award of $100,000 that year, or this grant season. So I assume they're used to some numbers being zero, and I assume they'll understand the narrative.
Yeah, I would assume that vacant lots improved is not buildings because
Yeah, 'cause
it
it's
has a
other
category for
subcategories.
new buildings
Yeah.
and I don't, and since we're so close to getting the seal for 791, why couldn't you put a little one on there on the new buildings? Structure.
Well, I was just thinking,
One with an
can
asterisk.
we report
Right.
percent of progress for anything?
But you know what, I'm
You know,
in contact with Crystal,
Yeah.
at least a few times
I
a
would
week.
ask.
And I'll just, if it's okay with the board, I'll ask the question straight out. Please define, what improvements are.
I think that's smart. And it also gives
We have
her,
nothing to lose.
it also gives her the knowledge, right? It gives her the knowledge
Sure.
that there is active work going on.
Active work and we're concerned about it.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that they said is grants secured, me and Paul were talking about it, is the LBI2 grant was secured before last September. It was just reactivated and modified. So, I mean, I could possibly put that over there too, but
One thing I wanted to mention, this is a Neighborhood Revitalization and Land Bank Act, and it's going to have federal grants, planning grants for land banks to target, revitalization plans for vacant and abandoned properties, and they're appropriating about 15 million. Looks like early on for this. And there's going to be technical assistance part of it. So I'll send it to all of you, but it looks really, really interesting. And it's the first time that, the federal government that I know is getting into, is trying to financially support.
So that's $15 million amongst all the states that have land banks, Catherine?
I'd have to pull the bill and see, but the summary that I read says 15 million, and the bill would establish 100 to 250,000 planning grants. So yeah, I mean, it would be extremely competitive.
No doubt.
But we'll see what the final bill says.
Yeah, when you're competing with places like Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, Michigan Land Bank is bigger than City Hall. It's
I'm sure.
ridiculous. They have like 100 employees.
I believe
It's
it.
ridiculous.
I was
Detroit.
talking to Syracuse, and they told me that just Syracuse alone has over $100,000 in dumping fines a year.
Yeah.
So,
Dumping fines.
Yeah, there's some, but those Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania also have residual funding through the state
Mhm.
and through the local communities. So they just have just such a different level of operation.
Kate, it's Paul. Question. So this grant, do you know that it's going to be available through HCR, or is it something that we could apply for directly as a land bank?
I don't know the answer to that. I haven't read through the entire legislation yet. There is a webinar coming up from Community Progress that's going to go over this. I'm signed up for that. I will send it to you so you can find out more information about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
anything else regarding the financial report?
Nope, we'll move on. I included the property status report. We had this, and so Seamus had asked for it, and so this is the way we used to report our maintenance and such. I modified it, edited it, and updated it so that we could have it for the board meeting. I didn't put it on the list of things to discuss, but at least we have it. If somebody has a question, I definitely.
Well, it's not necessarily tied to this, but who does maintain the properties and stuff?
So currently we have one vendor with the name Upstate Custom Remodels,
Mhm.
and they mow the lawns. That's particularly what we're talking about. They also would do boarding up of doors and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And Upstate Custom Remodels, I've said a couple times during board meetings, seems to do like 60 to 70% of the work in terms of they'll do the 60% of the front lawn, but not the last 30% in the back. And that's why we led to a code issue with 7 and 9 Park. We'll talk about that later. So in the middle of this year, we had budgeted for Trey's Lawn Care to go through and cut down the overgrowth and all the other properties, the ones that Upstate wasn't actually going to the backyard and doing. And so Trey's got most of them all the way down to, I believe he's got all of them down in, including A71.
And how come they just won't, they're just not doing part of the lawn because they're terrible or what? I don't understand.
Yes.
And how long's that contract with them?
A couple years now, a year and a half.
Is it at the point, how much longer? I mean, does it have?
Yeah, so structurally speaking, we should put out an RFP, get quotes from people. I mean, I'm excited to get to moving on to another person, because obviously I don't think it's a great standard to have is to do most of the lawn, but not all of the lawn. But we inherited him and we haven't had the bandwidth to do RFPs right now. And so we were able to get Trace to cut all this stuff down. So we're at the point where we can RFP for lawns, but we're also at the point where there's probably 2 more cuts for the year.
Mhm.
And so RFPing for lawns would be good, but it might be hard to get the attention of landscapers to do that.
But it's on the radar, which is good. 'Cause,
Yeah,
they're not doing what they should.
Who's handling snow removal for the sidewalks?
We have nobody yet. So we need to do an RFP for that for sure. Unless, of course, the amount is under a certain amount.
Contracts in place, because that's something that, I mean, as you know,
Yeah.
October's around the corner.
The good news is Kate has revised the RFP completely from head to toe, and we have that in possession. And we'll get into that when I start
Mhm.
chatting about LBI too.
Trey also does snow removal.
Yeah.
I love the concept of Trey just because he is somebody who is a product of our own community.
Mhm.
And he's built something for himself. So
Does good work.
he does good work.
Yeah.
He's a North Central kid, right? That has grown into having his own business and hustling. He
Mhm.
does hustle. I gotta give him that. So hopefully he gets the opportunity to submit as well too.
Yeah. And
Have we thought about doing like a combined RFP? Like snow removal and lawn care?
you could,
That way you can get it done, and then that way when April rolls around, like you roll from one season to the next.
Mhm.
Most landscapers, as you
They're doing
know,
both, yeah.
do both.
Sure.
and Trey's given us pricing on mowing. He just didn't have all of our addresses. So he sent me a proposal for mowing. And most of them are more competitive than Upstate. Upstate's sort of using a broad brushstroke approach, $50 for a house, but he only does the front lawn, and 75 per address. So with 7 Park, he's $75. For 9 and 11 Park, he's $75. Even though it's one field next door to each other, he charges 150. Then we still have to pay Trey $800 to cut the back third because he hadn't done it for so long. Yeah, so
Well, we did it because of code.
Oh, no, I
Yeah,
get it.
and
I
it
get
got
it.
done quickly.
yeah, and I think it's better to move on to a vendor that maybe isn't a remodeling company. That's my take. But I think that he was kept around in case there was a break-in and we needed a boarded up window. So his versatility was,
You could always have somebody on retainer to do that work.
yeah. And so
After Heather left, she told me about him and he was the one who did some boarding up. I don't know where he came from.
right. Yeah.
These contracts have a standard set, so you can hold accountable if the last 30% isn't done.
I asked
Is there a you have to do 100% of the lawn clause?
yeah. I asked Upstate for his contract and he doesn't have one.
Okay, well, something for us to think about moving
Oh,
forward. Hey,
yeah, trust me, yeah. I just, without, I guess to say without full authority to act, I kind of feel a little bit like apprehensive to act too fast because we don't have a budget in place for property maintenance. And so we also need to get our board together and we need to get certain number of members to make sure we have quorum. So my focus has been on that. And I didn't want to stir the pot on vendors that were actually doing something. to make sure that we have all our ducks in a row so somebody doesn't have any issues with the way we've been operating.
When's the last time you cut him a check?
I think September 5th,
And then
September 10th.
Trace has picked up his work since.
They're working in conjunction with each other. So when Whaley's first started, he wasn't doing certain properties at all, or maybe he was just doing the front of a building where there's 3 weeds. And so I took him off all of those properties immediately to save money.
That's who I'm thinking.
Yes.
I
Well,
knew there was
Upstate
a-
Custom is Whaley, sorry. Joe Whaley is his name. So when Upstate Custom remodels starting, I only kept him on properties he was cutting at least 60% of. That should be the way to say it. The ones he wasn't even doing the backyard and there was no front yard, I took him off of them. And those are the ones that needed massive work by Trace. And I figured the money we're saving by not getting billed for what he was doing, we could use towards cutting the backyards of the ones that he wasn't doing the backyards of. So right now, the properties themselves are all cut. And the third point, more trees is going to remove some stumps and cut some large trees off of some of our properties. So at 871 particularly, they're going to remove all the stumps so that a true landscaper should be able to just cut the whole grass. And like I said, my vision is to stripe it out, make it look like a baseball stadium or something. That way, when it's a development site, people can envision it as a positive place to put a building. Okay, we're going to talk about the Bonadio third party audit. Again, we're at the same place we were last month with Bonadio's. Have all our information. They keep asking for more testing is what they call it. And so, recently they've given me 13 submissions from our ARPA expenditures. Some of them they've already asked me about, which is kind of interesting in terms of like they want the support for a check that I've already given support in a different test that they've given me. So I think essentially they're having an entry level clerk sort of ask me to show support for things randomly just to see if we can do it. And if we can show support, then they'll trust that we categorize or kept track internally of all our expenses. It doesn't seem like they're trying to trip us up. They're just trying to make sure that if we don't have check stubs and invoices for things that would cause them to look further. So they've done it a couple more times. They finally asked me for a management analysis. And in the analysis that they asked for, their report wasn't quite matching what ours was. And I didn't know if that was a test to see if I actually knew what our P&L for 2023 was. So I responded with, you're asking me to analyze information that is not correct. So could we just fix that first before I do that? But otherwise, we're constant back and forth. And the most recent thing they've asked for is a day or two ago. So
Where's the, I was just looking at the profit and loss. Where are they accounted for in the budget?
So we wrote the check to them in September.
This year?
Yes. And last year we wrote the check to them in 2023. So you're only showing 2024.
Okay.
Um,
So this is your, okay. Yeah, I was just making sure that we,
I was gonna bring this up at some point, but since you kind of said the word, ARPA. Getting into a lot of stuff. Where the ARPA funds went, did they guys, does any money left?
Yeah. So that's what they wanted from me. And so I took so to be completely clear, no money has been spent by ARPA since the last 6 to 7, definitely the last 6 months, but probably the last money's been spent from ARPA, somewhere around there. The expenditures, and I can provide that to anybody, the board. I really should sit down with the comptroller or Gabrielle if she's the acting, so that way we can talk about the expenditure so far. But yeah, we have a clear accounting of where the money went. I can produce the report.
And so do you think, roughly, I would like to go over it.
Yeah.
And actually, yeah, we would, that's probably a meeting we would set up after get through the budget, frankly. But, do you know, roughly how much funds are left to be utilized?
Right. I think that we have about 150,000 that's left, and that's
Okay.
plus or minus some amount. But again, I can directly email you the information.
Okay, so we spent almost 800,000 on it.
800, yeah, 850 or so, yeah.
Right, and that's, remind me again, they have to be spent by the end of 2026, right?
Correct.
Right.
By
And
2026.
they have to be,
Contract by the end of this year,
Thank you.
but obviously that's. right in front of me.
right, but then
That
I think
meeting
doesn't
that
it have to be, I'm trying to find the word and it's like escaping me. You have to have it like allocated,
Mhm.
allocated by the end of
So
2024.
allocated, because we have to get it,
Committed by 2025 and spent by 2026.
so, well, allocated and contracted by the end of this year. And then spent by 2026.
Thank you.
So that's, so, I mean, it's appropriate because, you know, a lot of the ARPA stuff is going out of my office, and that's obviously something
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
gearing up on is, you know, is everybody had spent their money, although that's still a year away, but making sure everything's on track.
Mhm.
So good to hear that a bunch of.
Yeah, and the final big expense that we have for the ARPA, is the facade program. 136 and the north central. It's a program administered by TAP and contracted with TAP to do it.
And
Is-
TAP will actually execute as well too, the work. They'll do, like, they'll project manage, they'll
Yeah.
hire the contractors to do the work
Mhm.
and everything.
Are those addresses set yet?
Yeah, they took applications and they have we did site visits together. And so they're coming up with the plans of what they think we can accomplish with the money.
And did more people apply for it? Like, did you have to go through review, or was it just the right number? Or did
Everybody
who
that
reviewed it, TAP?
to accept everybody and come up with a plan for everybody. It won't be quite everything everybody wished for. Some people wanted their whole house re-sided and new windows. And other people just simply wanted like,
I mean, why not ask?
How much are they each getting? Is it different for?
right,
More
it's gonna be
years.
different because the projects are not gonna be exactly the same, but I think that TAP's goal was under 18,000 per building.
Which is still a good chunk.
Yeah, we just, I mean, separate, but there was funding set up through, for TRIP, similar, and it was set up where there was, and more folks would be able to get it, but it was a small dollar amount, and it was like 5,000 or something, which wasn't gonna really,
It was super specific too.
we opened it up and are kind of going that other route. We're trying to give people, 20,000 or so, and charge TRIP with, to try to have a cluster effect. Like we don't want, someone doing windows up on, I mean, the east side wouldn't get it, but poor east side. But we don't want, windows going on here and 7 blocks down the road here, where it was like, you could help your application if your neighbor, let's turn a block around instead of just new windows spread out all over the city. So that's kind of the different approach there too. But so that's good. That's a decent amount.
So can I
But
say-
yeah, going over that, I mean, that is something I would like to, I mean, I'm sure maybe the other board members would like to see too, but for our purposes, that will be something that we can go over in the near future.
Yeah, it would probably be good if we create committees today to create a finance committee that could do that. That'd be great. But of course, given your position, I've been more than happy to come down with what I've come up with,
Mhm.
In both the board and also with the city, because we do need to communicate with the city on that.
CDBG project, usually the funding for city sidewalks and streetscape improvements, there's generally this other piece. Do we know if any of the work that we're looking at is in concert with where CDBG has been recently?
I don't know.
Okay, that'd be
There's-
really
I mean,
interesting.
The work is all in North Central from 102nd down.
Yeah.
Some
That's
places,
the area they're in right now, so.
right, but some places aren't, like Park and Glen. Or forget the name of the street right behind Glen there.
But so if somebody, if the city's focusing on the main drag, which
Yeah.
typically they do, right? And then if we can bolster, just, it might be even good, like, again, going back to that blocking, right?
Mhm.
Like take a map, a Google Earth map and block
Mhm.
out, and then also maybe work with CDBG and see where they're working. And maybe there's a concentration, going
Mhm.
back to your trip comment, right? Concentration of effort in a specific area, which I think is, talking about the whole picture versus what the land bank's doing and what Trip is doing, like, what is the whole picture?
Mhm.
And how is the entire city network trying to lift up a neighborhood?
I think that conversation would have been great, like last year or year before. Just truthfully, like TAP's already taken the applications months ago. Done
No, which is fine.
Yeah,
Which is fine. But
yeah.
again, this is also looking forward to the next round, like, right? How
Mhm.
do we, and I don't know if there's a way, when Tony was here, there was a liaison, you know what I mean? We also had the benefit of having Chris, right, who is also part of the planning
Mhm.
department. But, if there's a way to work with the planning department to see where their strategic moves are, where their investments are, you know what I mean? And then kind of work in concert with them. I think that's a good plan as well, too.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Is the 137 for facades, is that coming out of the 150 that's remaining? Is that what you were saying?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so it already is allocated, committed, essentially.
Yeah, and whatever remaining is pretended even could be 180. I'm not 100% on that number. I have it and I can pull it up and send it to everybody. And I might just do that after the board meeting. But the rest of it's to improve vacant buildings or buildings in general. It's their obligation to get their end of the funding. And so some of the money that has been moved around because of that.
Where, how much money was, so there's the Legacy Cities program, I think it's these 9 properties, right?
Yeah.
That includes like 834 River. How much money was,
I have that in a
I
spreadsheet.
mean, because if you think about it, the money was awarded to the land bank April of 2022. I mean, at least it's when it's executed. The land bank hasn't done anything in the past 6 or so months. And then in 2023, it also was wobbly, right? Did we do a lot of stuff in 2023?
I think some things got done, but yeah.
So we're talking about like $850,000.
Yeah, I have the expenses.
Because if these folks didn't fill their end of it, then what we did and what happened to that funding?
Right. So we still did the things like surveys and architectural work and engineering work, site plan work, and a lot of pre-development was done. And again, I have it all the expenses for us to go over.
Yeah, we'll go over.
And but yeah, so
Because it is, yeah.
some of the ARPA money was spent to pay past expenses as well and ongoing operating costs too. But certainly the Legacy Cities thing needs to be modified because
Frankly, that's why I asked. I obviously didn't read through a whole 40-page contract between the city and the land bank, but hopefully all those funds were executed properly and not used for stuff that's not necessary.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Look forward to going over it with you.
Yeah. And so regulatory compliance, I think we're on the same track as we were before in terms of, live streaming our meetings and getting our meetings on the website and that sort of thing. We are closer to the new website. We have to get bio rough, as you know. So we're moving forward with that, but I don't have much to add to it from last meeting. The 791 River Street update. Last meeting, we talked about the sprinkler problem. The sprinkler wasn't designed, but yet was installed. So now Matthew's met over there with the fire department, the police department, code department, and we got an actual punch list as opposed to in the past, they would come and say, yeah, you just got to do this one thing and this other thing. So the sprinkler inspection prodded the departments to really give us a clearer answer to what we need to do to get our CO for the second and third floor. The sprinkler company, Matthew Sprinkler, it's been over there. He's been doing work, cut the sheetrock. He looked at the pipes. He drew up a plan. I think it's submitted to code. He has to do some adjustments and add a sprinkler head. He had to adjust the fire extinguisher because the pipe coming out of the wall outside was too small to accommodate, or not extinguisher, fire hydrant. The hydrant from the outside's 2.5 inch pipe.
To accommodate the sprinkler system.
Right.
Siamese.
Yeah, so it's a 2.5 inch pipe is what it's supposed to be. It was only 1.5 inches, so the fire department wouldn't get the proper flow, they said. So Matthews has been great doing that, and we've executed contracts to move the furnace. I'm not sure that's done yet, but we had to execute a contract to get a new water line installed because they had tapped off the sprinkler line instead of going in, from the road. So the
For
city,
domestic.
Did you separate?
initially it wasn't run separate, so we
Was
ran.
that done the other day?
Yeah.
That's where the ground's dug up.
And so that's changed. The sheetrock to restore what Matthews did, but also to encapsulate the area that needs to be fire rated has been contracted, but of course Matthews has finished his work to finish up the sheetrock. Some adjustments to the deck and the strong tie fasteners have been made. So there was just a couple things, but everything's,
Couple things.
well, I mean,
Is that all it called for to fix that deck? You have to do with strong ties?
well, they had the strong ties, but the fasteners were just deck screws.
Yeah.
So they needed the deck screws.
The posts are
Everything was
strong enough?
Yeah. Well, the handrails needed to be.
There needed to be some
Did they
sistering.
put
There need-
blocking underneath
There,
it?
there needed to be some blocking put in, some sistering in order for each post to be able
That's
to
what it
carry
looked
the
like,
weight of the
just
rail
block.
and
Yeah.
enough force.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yep.
This is gonna be a great, like, textbook case study of.
What not
Great when
to
it
do.
sells.
Don't hire Tony Todd.
No, it's literally, I mean, literally, like when you go to these like conferences and you'll be going to those things, like they have, like, this is a panel discussion, right? Like what the trials and tribulations of
Right.
trying to do this work, right?
Yeah.
Like what happens when you like get a shoddy type of system, right? And the amount of time and energy and money it takes to fix it,
Mhm.
plus the legal component of this,
Mhm.
right? Like this is part of the challenge of doing the work, this work is it, it's a part of the story.
Yeah, and definitely looking back, I think that there was some trust put into both Tony Tazi and Tony Diadamo. And the code department during COVID was working with him, but he had missed a couple steps and he took what they said in terms of like, yeah, okay, that's fine. But then he moved forward with things that he didn't, like the sprinkler system. Before he installed it, he should have had a design and he was able to start construction before the design was in, as long as he didn't close it all up. But then he closed it all up and never went back to code. And typically, I don't think it's on code to come to you when you're building a new construction building and say, hey, I just want to make sure before you do this, and then have to remind the developer that their
It should
project.
be all part of the permit review.
Right,
If
right.
they're reviewing the permit, it should be 100%. If not, if they can issue a conditional permit, right? A phased permit. We've seen that before,
Mhm.
whether it's foundations or it's shell or whatever,
Mhm.
but there's
Usually you probably design it before you put it in, I'd say, right?
Right, but with a
no, I mean, it's legit that they, especially some larger projects, right? They'll do phased permit process where they'll do foundation work and then they'll do,
Oh, he
it-
did
it-
that one, but he's.
No,
Not
no,
to skip the design part.
No, I know.
That's like,
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, and to be honest, during COVID, it was hard.
Yeah, that's the
because-
way. I get. That's his MO.
Matthews did the design and
Yeah,
stamped the drawing.
he's been great, actively working, cut the sheetrock. He had adjusted the fire hydrant and he's working.
He's doing the work, but he also did provided the stamp.
Right. Well, if code
He
has
could get it.
got the permit executed, yes, I'm not sure of that just yet, but
Code was very helpful.
Yeah.
Very helpful.
Brian, quite honestly, I don't think we could have found anybody other than Seth that would have been willing to take this on. Anybody else would have said, I'll come in, but rip the lids down. They would want to see everything.
Yeah.
You know, Seth knew a little bit about the process, like going through it, like he knew who Tony used to start some of it, like he knew that sprinkler fitter.
Yeah.
So I think we got lucky, and I think Seth is trusted the code department they'll take what, he says. Seth isn't gonna put his company, his uncle's company, his company on the line for.
Yeah.
Our land bank, that's for sure.
Just to give you, this is Seth's text, his text from September 6th. He said, I need the plans still, which we got him. I emailed him and he said, I took down a few recessed lights to get pictures of the piping. I'll put them back in after. So he's doing as minimal, like invasive stuff as possible. And he says he won't do anything other than plans and calculations for now. That's 2 weeks ago. So sure, at this point, he submitted them.
Are the pipes the same on both floors as far as where they are?
I don't think
Never
anybody knows that
mind.
answer, you know?
If there was a plan, that would have been great.
Yeah.
I can tell you this, I think, if we're doing it, the sprinkler heads line up about in the same position. So regarding where the pipes are, I can't answer that because the walls are covered.
Okay.
Well, it also depend on the use of each area.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think we have a couple things to get through, so.
Yeah.
You know, I'll let Paul discuss where he's at with the LBI two capital improvement.
Sure. In our last meeting, if you all recall, on each project, because that was a requirement, obviously, from HTFC, we were able to get that completed for each individual property and therefore able to submit to SHPO, which again gave us approvals on the rest of our projects that were pending. And now we're at the HCR level. 2 of our projects have been approved. Both are roofing projects at this point in time. I think the other projects they'd like to take a little deeper look at because it's not quite as simple as just put a new roof on. Kate, again, I'll bring you up, was able to redo our RFP. I have one copy of the RFP here, just for one of the properties. It's a 20-page RFP. Most of it is legal stuff for obvious reasons. The next step that we need to do with these RFPs is to publish them. And that I put a call into you guys yesterday. I don't know if you got it. It was late in the day.
Who'd you call?
I left a message with Kitty.
Kitty?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, no big deal. And publishing these, obviously, we're gonna use our website to publish, we'll use social media like Facebook. I'm a firm believer in posting with any building supply houses in the area. It achieves a lot because it'll get you a lot more proposals in the office. Obviously, our offices, I reached out to Rensselaer County. They're contemplating being able to put our RFP on there. And Seamus, why I called you was if we could get our RFPs up on the city website, I think that would be great. I think we would be covered for our MWBE and our Disabled American Veterans requests, et cetera.
Have you thought about doing contract reporter?
I thought about contract reporter. I also thought about BidNet. I did want to bring that up to the board to see what your thoughts were about that.
I've used contract reporter both previously
Sure.
and in current position, and usually get a pretty good response from it. And you can click those, the veteran aspect and the MWEPE, and if you have a prevailing wage, you can do that process right through Department of Labor and get your document
Sure.
if you have that requirement.
Now, I'm always familiar with contract reporter from the other side of the fence, from the vendor side.
Yep. So you wouldn't even need to have, like, normally, like right now.
We are.
Okay.
And it's not. Why incur the expense?
No, I don't disagree. Because that does cost you money.
Sure.
It was like $500.
Oh, easy. Easy.
For one ad or for?
One ad.
I think $4,500 that you don't spend.
Right.
So that's where we are. We're rating RFPs. We have 2 of them written already.
Are you doing it all one month? Like so if you have 3 roofs, are you saying
No,
3 roofs?
Nope.
at-
we're going individual. One individual. And the reason is this. I think if we get a bidder who really, really like a price for other considerations, whatever the case may be, obviously let them earn it. If we put all 3 out at one and then all of a sudden we're through one roof and we're really not happy with it, it's going to be a lot to cut bait. So that's my feeling. But please add to it.
Just weigh that against the financial benefit of
Yeah.
how much lower the cost could be if you were offering three.
You know,
Understood.